happens when a country music star who battled addiction and time in prison sits across from a host who thinks she already has him all figured out? What you're about to witness isn't just tense, it's unforgettable. Jelly Roll, the tattooed powerhouse whose journey is deeply human, sat down on The View, expecting a heartwarming conversation about music, second chances, and redemption. But within minutes, things took a sharp turn. What began as a friendly chat spiraled into a heated on-air exchange that no one in the room saw coming. And the question you need to be asking yourself is, where is the line on judging someone for their past? Before we dive any further, please take a moment to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below, because by the time you're done watching, you're going to have a lot to say. The studio lights were blind and bright as Jelly Roll straightened his black button down and took his seat. The audience buzzed, and many of them were fans who had witnessed his incredible transformation from life behind bars to the top of the country charts. The atmosphere was palpable and electric. Whoopi Goldberg had just wrapped up her opening remarks. She turned to him with a huge smile. Our next guest has certainly lived a full life, from prison to the country music charts. Please give a huge round of applause for Jelly Roll. The studio erupted in applause. Jelly Roll waved at the audience, a genuine smile lighting up his face. There was a warmth and authenticity about him that immediately drew people in. "Thank you so much for having me," he said, his voice rich with his southern drawl. "I've been watching this show for years, so it's pretty surreal to be here." For the first few minutes, the interview seemed to be going just as expected. Sarah Haynes asked about his music, his collaborations, and his upcoming tour. Jelly Roll answered with honesty and humility, sharing how music had saved his life, how fatherhood had changed his trajectory, and how he now uses his platform to connect with others who are struggling. But then he went deeper. "You know," Jelly Roll said, leaning forward, "a lot of people see someone like me with all these tattoos and a past like mine, and they just make up their mind without really hearing my story. But the truth is, people can change. All people can change." The audience leaned in. This was the Jelly Roll they admired, raw, honest, and unfiltered. Alyssa Farah Griffin asked him about his involvement in criminal justice reform, and Jelly Roll's demeanor shifted slightly. His expression became more serious, his voice carrying more weight. "I've been on both sides of the equation," he stated. "I know what it's like to feel like your life is defined by one mistake. But no one should have to live with that. People deserve a chance to be seen for who they are now." The energy in the room was building. It was empowering. And then everything changed. Joy Behar, who had been sitting with a slight smirk and a knowing look, finally spoke up. "Well, that's all very inspirational," she began, her tone subtly cutting. "But let's get back to reality. You were a criminal for many years. You used drugs, and you were in prison. How can you come here today and talk about redemption like you're some sort of expert?" A collective gasp went through the studio. You could feel the tension snap. Jelly Roll's smile faded, but he remained composed. "I'm not claiming to be an expert," he replied calmly. "I'm just talking about my life and what I've been through. If my story can help someone else avoid the pain that I went through, then it's worth it." Joy wasn't finished. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes unwavering. "But is it convenient?" she challenged. "Now that you're successful and you have a platform, Suddenly, you're this reformed person. How do we know this isn't just a part of your brand? The moment hung in the air. You could see the shift on Jelly Roll's face. His jaw tightened. His eyes flickered. So the real question becomes, what happens when patience meets pure provocation? Because what was about to come next, no one on that panel or in that studio was prepared for. And the world would soon be stunned. His hands clenched into fists on his lap for a brief second before slowly relaxing, as if he were forcibly pushing the storm back down. The other hosts shifted uneasily around him. This wasn't the interview anyone was expecting. "Joy," he said, his voice even but with a warning tone. "I think you are missing the point. This is not a PR stunt. This is my life. These words are not scripted. This is everything I have ever been through." Joy did not budge. If anything, she leaned in, and here's where things really started to heat up. "It is easy to speak of redemption," she responded, her voice ice cold, "when you are walking away with a record deal and sell-out shows. But what about those whom you have harmed? The communities that have suffered due to the decisions you made?" The words hit like a ton of bricks. The air in the room became so thick that you could almost feel the oncoming storm. Jelly Roll straightened up. He took a deep breath, and something fired up behind his eyes, something undeniably raw. "You want to talk about the people I hurt?" he boomed, the sound echoing throughout the room. "Let's talk about them. Let's talk about how I've spent every single day since getting clean, trying to make things right, trying to do better, trying to use whatever little voice I have to ensure another person doesn't have to go through the hell that I have endured." Joy didn't stop. "That doesn't undo what you've done," she retorted. "That doesn't bring back those who lost their lives. You cannot sing your way out of this." And in that moment, everything exploded. The composure that he had clung to broke. Jelly Roll sprang up from his seat, knocking his chair back behind him. He towered over the desk, and his voice boomed through the studio, shaking the silence. "Are you freaking serious right now?" he roared, the southern twang in his voice thick with emotion. "Do you honestly think I do not live with the fact of what I've done? Who I've hurt every day?" The audience collectively gasped. Cameras swiveled. Producers looked panicked about whether to cut away. Whoopi sat frozen. Sarah clasped a hand over her mouth. Alyssa was still as stone. But Joy barely flinched. In fact, she even smirked. "There it is," she said, gesturing toward him with her chin. "There is the real you. There is the man behind all of the talk of redemption, still so full of anger, just presented in a different package." The room was dead silent, and now it was Jelly Roll's turn. His voice was lower now, controlled, but charged with more power than before. "You want to see the real me?" he questioned, leaning forward so his hands were planted on the desk. "The real me was in a cell for years, thinking about every person I've wronged, every family I've destroyed, every choice I cannot take back." He paused long enough to let the weight of his words sink in. "The real me has nightmares about those who did not survive the lifestyle I led. The real me shows up to funerals, wishing I could rewind time." Joy tried to jump back in, but Jelly Roll silenced her. "No," he said, his tone sharp and unwavering. "You started this conversation, so we're finishing it." The tension in the room was palpable. "You sit there and pass judgment," he continued, his voice dangerously steady, When have you ever had to rebuild? When have you ever had to climb back from the bottom? You see redemption as a strategy because it has never been necessary for your survival. For the first time, the confidence on Joy's face wavered. The camera captured a fleeting moment of hesitation, a crack in her composed facade. I am simply asking the questions that need to be asked, she responded. But the conviction in her voice was weaker than it had been before. People need to be held accountable. Accountable? Jelly Roll chuckled, a dry, hollow sound, devoid of humor. You think this is accountability? I am held accountable every single day. I am working with people struggling with addiction. I am trying to get people to overcome. And now the inescapable question emerges. When someone truly transforms, who is it who gets to determine whether it is sufficient? I go into prisons, Jelly Roll continued, his voice unwavering, and I sit face to face with kids who were heading down the same road I did. I help families who've lost loved ones to overdoses. I show up. I give back. So tell me, what are you doing to make the world better, besides tearing people down on national television? That landed hard. Whoopi finally stepped in, trying to steady the moment. But the momentum had already shifted, and Jelly Roll wasn't letting go. His focus stayed locked on Joy. You know the difference between me and you, he said, his tone sharp but controlled. I admit when I'm wrong. I take responsibility. You sit here acting like you're morally above everyone else. But really, you're just a bully with a microphone. Now the tension snapped the other way. Joy's face flushed instantly. How dare you call me a bully? She fired back. I'm a journalist asking real questions. About what? Jelly Roll cut in, his voice rising again. About the idea that people can't change. That anyone with a past should just disappear? He stepped closer to the desk, every word hitting with precision. You're not asking questions. You're pushing an agenda. And that agenda is making people feel small so you can feel bigger. The room was frozen hosts, audience. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. But Joy wasn't backing down. I've interviewed thousands of people, she shot back, her voice tightening. I know the difference between real change and a good story. And what I see is someone who's learned exactly what to say to make people forget who they really are. And that hit deeper than anything before it. For a moment, Jelly Roll didn't respond. His expression shifted, hurt, anger. Then something quieter, something heavier. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, but it carried more weight than ever. What I really am, he said slowly, is a father who wants his daughter to be proud of him. The room softened, but the intensity didn't fade. What I really am is someone who's seen rock bottom and fights every day not to go back. What I really am is a man who made terrible choices and is spending the rest of his life trying to make them right. He paused, letting every word settle. Then his tone sharpened again. But what you are, Joy, is someone who gets paid to tear people apart on television. Someone who confuses cruelty with intelligence. Someone who's never had to fight for anything real, so you don't recognize what real change looks like. Joy tried to respond, but he raised his hand, stopping her cold. I'm not finished. And now everything shifted once more. You want to talk about accountability? He continued. Let's talk about yours. How many people have you discouraged from getting help because you made them believe they'll never be accepted? How many second chances have you crushed with that mindset? Each question landed like a hammer. How many families have you kept divided because you convinced them people can't change? This time, the silence wasn't just tension, it was impact. Joy's confidence had faded. The certainty she carried at the start was gone, replaced with something far less steady. You think you're exposing something, Jelly Roll went on, his voice now filled more with disappointment than anger. But all you're really doing is showing people exactly who you are. Someone who would rather tear others down than build anything meaningful. Sarah tried to step in softly, carefully, but neither of them acknowledged it. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was something deeper, a clash of beliefs. Two completely different views of redemption colliding in real time. I stand by what I said, Joy insisted, though her voice wavered. People have a right to question convenient transformations. Jelly Roll shook his head slowly, and when he looked at her now, there was no anger, just something close to sadness. You know what's really tragic, he said quietly. We could have used this moment to talk about addiction, about second chances, about how people rebuild their lives. He paused, but instead, you chose to be cruel. For what? The weight of that question settled over the entire studio. For a brief moment, even Joy seemed to hesitate like she might actually reflect. But then, just as quickly, the walls went back up. Don't lecture me about cruelty, she snapped. This is journalism. These are tough questions. If you can't handle scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be in the spotlight. And that's when Jelly Roll let out a cold, humorless laugh. Tough questions, he repeated. He leaned forward slightly, eyes locked in. All right, then. Let me ask you some tough questions. When was the last time you owned you messed up? Jelly Roll's voice cut through the hush. When was the last time you showed grace to somebody that you messed up and asked them to still understand you? He pressed on. When was the last time that you actually used your platform for positive instead of to tear somebody down? Joy opened her mouth but couldn't form words. For the first time, she looked flustered. Their roles had been switched, and she didn't hold the power in this conversation any longer. That's what I thought. Jelly Roll's voice rose again. You could throw it at me all day, but as soon as you get hit, it's an issue. Whoopi interjected, attempting to gain control. All right, we really need to... No, Jelly Roll said firmly, turning towards Whoopi with respect. I get what you're trying to do, but this is important. The room now understood this was no longer a fleeting moment, but a powerful message. I walked in here, genuinely, he stated, and said I was happy to talk about music, about redemption, about trying to reach some kid out there. He looked back at Joy. Instead, I walked into an ambush. You judged me before I ever got on this show. He paused. The worst part is, today, you could have asked me about the program, what the kids I'm mentoring are doing, the work I'm doing to help them be better than I was. He locked his eyes with hers. Instead, you took what I am to shreds. I am not a bully, Joy retorted sharply. Who? Jelly Roll boomed back, composure shattering again. For getting clean? For turning my life around? For trying to help other people not go down my road? His voice reverberated around the studio. Why am I being punished today if I don't have a past that is going to make you uncomfortable? The room was thick with tension. The audience members looked stunned, some covering their mouths in disbelief. as producers scrambled backstage, unsure of how to respond to a potentially disastrous moment in television history. "You are being held accountable," Joy shot back, attempting to reclaim her authority, "for profiting off of a redemption story, while other real people suffer from your behavior." "Profit?" he scoffed. His voice broke with an emotion he'd held back. Not anger, but something far more profound. "Do you really think this is profit? I have earned every dollar. I've had to earn every opportunity that I get." He leaned forward, tears welling in his eyes. "You don't think I know that people's loved ones have died because of my past? You don't think I lie up at night wondering if I did right by myself, by asking for redemption, by trying to use my platform to save somebody?" The room's tension shifted into raw emotion. "I give away more money in a year than a lot of people make in a lifetime. I spend my time in prisons and juvenile detention centers talking to kids about the importance of taking their lives back and fighting for it. But you don't want to hear that, do you?" He knew this wasn't about one interview any longer. "You already know who I am. Nothing I do or say will change your mind." "Evidence?" Joy scorned. "Donations? Some prison visits? That's it?" And the question hung in the air. And with that question, everything changed. Jelly Roll straightened, his eyes no longer fiery, but filled with an immense sadness. "No, I can't change my past." The room held its breath. This time, it was a silence not of fear, but of attentiveness. "I can't bring them back. I can't make amends. But I live with that every day of my life." His voice softened but grew more grounded. "What you're asking is if I deserve forgiveness. Do I deserve another chance? Is somebody like me capable of moving on?" He looked out at the hosts, the audience, and the cameras before answering his own question. "I don't know if I deserve it." He paused. "But I know one thing." He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life earning it." Joy began to speak, but Jelly Roll held up a hand. "You want to judge me?" Jelly Roll asked, his voice flat, rooted in something beyond anger. "Okay, then. Judge me by what I do from this point on." He took a breath. "Judge me by the lives that I help save, by the children that I pull off of this same path that I walked, by the families that I put back together. A beat past. Don't judge me by who I was. Judge me by who I am becoming." The silence that followed was deafening. No applause, no interruption, just silence. Even Joy, for the first time all day, had nothing to say. The camera was locked onto her face, and for one fleeting moment, a flicker crossed it. Something unexpected. Doubt. Perhaps even regret? Jelly Roll wasn't finished, though. "You brought me here today, thinking you were outing some fraud," he continued, his voice quiet, yet unwavering. "All you've done is show that you don't believe people can change." He adjusted his shirt, then stared directly into the camera. This was no longer just about him. "Anyone who is out there watching right now," he said, "anyone who is dealing with addiction, drowning in things that they have done that they can't undo, anyone who has been told they can never be anything but a mistake that they've made." He paused, letting that sink in. "I want you to hear this." His voice softened, yet reached further. "You can change. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be overnight. But it is possible. And there is no person on this earth that can tell you otherwise." The room was still frozen. One last attempt from Joy. "You're being a little over the top," Joy declared, attempting to salvage the situation. Over the top, Jelly Roll fired back, sharp, yet controlled. You question my character, my motives, my right to speak on my own life, and then you try to drag me in front of the whole world. He shook his head, a slow, almost regretful gesture. And when I stand up and say that this is accountability, you call it dramatic? There is no anger in his voice now, just clarity. And the unfortunate thing about you, Joy, is that you are one of the reasons that people don't want to reach out for help. One of the reasons families are broken. One of the reasons they stay filled with shame. Another beat of silence. You are part of the problem. I am not. And with that, he turned his back. The exchange had ended. He turned to Whoopi instead, his respectfulness returning. Thank you for having me on the show. I am truly sorry for how this conversation unfolded, but I am not sorry for defending my character. As he walked away from the desk, his image flickered onto Joy's face for one last time. Her confident facade had crumbled and was replaced by that all-too-familiar look of a realization arriving too late. "Wait!" Joy called out, but he kept walking. "We're done," he said over his shoulder. "I came on here to talk about hope, and then we turned it into something else, and that's not on me." He then exited the stage. The audience remained immobile. The hosts remained quiet, speechless, trying to digest the entire exchange. An interview had quickly spiraled into an explosive confrontation, a clash of judgments and forgiveness, skepticism versus experience, tearing down versus building up. So what is your opinion? Should people be given a second chance, or are they doomed to be judged forever for their past mistakes? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Also, be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed this raw, impactful story that's truly one you won't want to miss.